Good morning. My name is Finlay Macleoid. I come from Scotland, the northern part of Scotland. I was very fortunate over the years. My father spoke Gaelic. My mother didn't. My father spoke Gaelic to us all the time. My mother couldn't. At the age of 3, my sister and also my brother went to live in the Western Isles, and they had come from Aberdeenshire. In Aberdeenshire, there is no Gaelic at all spoken. But within 4 weeks, my sister could speak Gaelic quite easily, no hassle, no difficulty at all. And within the same period of time, my brother, my older brother, could speak Gaelic as well. But he couldn't speak any English. He lost his English within 4 weeks. And the reason for that was very simple. The community was so strong. Children went out and played together. And it was really something to behold. The community itself had about 1,000 speakers in it, 1,000 people in it. There were about 6 people who didn't speak Gaelic. This we're talking about 1950s, 1954. Since then, the community has become much weaker. Few of the children speak Gaelic, and really we have to and had to look at what was happening with regard to the Gaelic language throughout Scotland. I was very fortunate. I went to live in London and to live in Loughborough in England and met a person there called Finlay Macleoid. Finlay Macleoid wrote a book, one of the very earliest books, called The Problem of Language Revival. And he said, look at Israel, look at Estonia, look at Latvia, and all the countries that were around Europe. They've all taken back their language. Many of them were in an empire and had lost any power with regard to their language, but they brought it back. If they could do that there, why could they not do it in Scotland with Gaelic? What was actually stopping us? At the time, Gaelic was not in the school in any kind of shape or form, except in 4 high schools. Less than 50 people got full-time employment from the language. Most of these were ministers of religion. All the others, they were teachers, but we're not talking about more than 6 or 7 teachers. And that's around 1974, 75. The situation now is quite transformed in terms of people who are working. I understand there's something like 1,500 people getting employment. So in some ways, things have changed, but in other ways they haven't. In fact, they've gone back quite a lot. And in 1982, 5 of us decided to go down to Wales to see what was happening in Wales, because all we were doing was hearing how absolutely marvellous the situation was there. They had 600,000 people who spoke Welsh, and they had it in the school system, total immersion in terms of the preschool, the primary school, and the high school, and it was flourishing. So 5 of us went down. We went round the preschool groups, the Welsh medium schools, the high schools, the universities, and many other places. And it was really good, exceptionally good. The numbers going into the Welsh medium education system was growing to the extent that there's about 20% today who go through Welsh medium education. Came back from Wales, set up an organisation called CNSA, the Gaelic Preschools Organisation. And over the next 30 years almost, we had set up over 70 what are called parent and child groups. These are really for parents who have children between nothing and 3. And then we set up another 250 groups at different times with regard to children between 3 and 5. And from that, we were able to establish 60 Gaelic medium schools. Now, we were in a strange situation because the numbers in the rural areas were very small. So we could open a unit in a school with only 4 children. But we could, as long as we could show that there were 20 children over the next 5 years, we could ensure that there was a Gaelic medium unit established. Sometimes these numbers didn't actually come into being because the parents decided who were going to send their children to the schools didn't. They simply didn't. And we still have a number of small schools, but we also have schools that have grown and gone into a high school in Glasgow and other places. Anyway, as time went on, the area of work that I was involved in was preschool. And a few strange things started to happen. For example, parents would send their children to the school who spoke Gaelic and leave Gaelic to the school and start speaking English at home. And when you ask them, oh, their Gaelic in school is much better than ours at home. It's quite the opposite. But because many of them couldn't read or write, that's what they believed. And the whole thing was left to the school. And the publicity machine, and I must admit I was part of it, the publicity machine was there telling everyone how good the schools were in terms of language revitalization, how much you could do, and they did. But at the same time, we were actually losing our community. We had a lot of children coming in who spoke no Gaelic at all. In fact, in some schools, there were no Gaelic-speaking children coming into the schools in the first instance. So things started to throw up an awful lot of questions. How important is Gaelic medium education? I would say crucial. Absolutely crucial. It's there, it's crucial. But it has side effects if you don't watch out. Now, previous to Gaelic medium education, they taught Gaelic as a subject in some of the schools, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 4 hours, sometimes even 6 hours. Not one child ever came out of these classes. How could they? It was impossible, absolutely impossible for it to occur. A child takes, of the age of 5 to 10, takes about 2,000 hours to learn a language. A school language, not the home language, that's a different thing altogether. The school language, it takes about 2,000 hours. So if you're doing an hour a week or 2 hours a week, what are we playing at? What is the point? What is the actual point of the whole thing? The second part was, as soon as we learned that, or as soon as I learned it, we started moving to setting up Gaelic medium schools. But it was the propaganda that was coming out, both from our own country and from other countries, that children can learn really quickly. That is just not the case. That's simply not the case if you have it as a subject in a school. And many of the teachers who were teaching as a subject in the school were the first ones to jump into Gaelic medium education. Why? Within 6 months they could see a result. Children not speaking to children speaking. Why are they going to spend all their time for having no success in one system, when at the same time, that system, if it was done entirely through the medium of Gaelic and you had preschool education feeding the system, you could have children coming out within a year able to speak. And in that, for a lot of people, it was success. Unfortunately, it's not for me, even though I worked in that system, pushed it in every kind of way possible, helped to set up groups, helped to set up schools, but suddenly, absolutely and suddenly, the thing really hit us in the head. Children were learning Gaelic, even in the school. Never took it out. Why? It just didn't seem correct to us that here we were putting children through Gaelic medium education, and all that was happening was they had education in Gaelic. They didn't have any social language. They didn't have the social language in terms of the family, in terms of the home. No school can teach that. No, the teacher would be in prison. The language of affection, the language of endearment, none of that. So while we set up the Gaelic medium schools to try and ensure that we would have a population that spoke the language in the next generation, it couldn't happen. It wasn't done. It's just not possible. Simply not possible. And then you find out that in places like Wales and in Ireland, the figures are tiny of those who've gone through Welsh medium education, Irish medium education, even after 3 generations. They're not able to pass the language that they've learned onto their children. They don't have the sectors of language. They simply don't have them. It's not that they don't want to, and many of them will send their children in the next generation to the same school and the next generation after that. So they're not completing the cycle. They have school language can provide about 10% of the language a child needs. But rarely does it come out of the school. It doesn't need to. School language initially was about work. It had nothing to do with social language. So that's why you find in certain communities that English has been in the schools since 1872, when Gaelic was not banned but kept out of the system. Today, the communities are Gaelic speaking, but the school is English speaking. Why has the transfer never occurred? Quite simply, the social language that's required is not there. You just don't have it. So I have to go back a slight distance, and that is to about 1987, when a family who learned Gaelic, the parents learned Gaelic, and the children were going to start in a Gaelic medium school. And they came to me and said, we'd really like to learn Gaelic in terms of the home and of the children. Said, we speak Gaelic, but we can organise a holiday for going to Malaga or to Spain or wherever, but we don't have the language to talk to our children because it's not the same language that you have in courses. It's just not there. I can't talk to my child in terms of putting a sock on or changing their nappies or their diapers. I just can't do that. I don't have it. So then we started thinking, my goodness, what can we do? Because at the same time also, there were parents or families which had one parent speaking Gaelic and the other parent not, and the children were being brought up in English. We had to change that. There's just no two ways about it. So we started what was called a family language plan, an action plan, which gives guidance to the parents. For example, the parent that speaks Gaelic, they should speak Gaelic as much as humanly possible to the child. The parent who speaks English tries to learn Gaelic, but will use English with the child. And in the evening, often, what happens is that they speak English to each other in terms of the main things, many of them throughout the televisions, to try and ensure that their children could actually be raised as Gaelic speaking. So later on, another thing happened, which was really most interesting, in the sense that a lady from Hawaii came over to Skye for a Gaelic language course. And she had heard about the things that we were doing in terms of Gaelic medium education, and she was wanting to find out information as to what we did and to provide information as to what they did. Anyway, I'd been really struggling trying to find an answer to how we could work entirely through the medium of Gaelic, both in the preschool groups and in terms of courses. And suddenly, it happened. She came to us and said, oh, we work entirely through the medium of Hawaiian, and we have an English room if there's any problem with regard to the children, but we do everything through the medium of the language itself. And within 15 weeks, almost all the children are speaking Hawaiian. And when new children come in, they already have it. And then I said, well, why can't we transfer some of these same skills with regard to adults? We need a completely different environment because the adult is not going to go into a nursery. What are the things that are really needed? Well, they need the language of the home. They need the language of the child. They need the language of endearment and many other things. So suddenly, the thing all came together. We could work entirely through the medium of Gaelic because I really have an absolute dislike of translation. I think it destroys languages. Absolute and utter detestation of translation. Because if you're translating from English into Gaelic, English is the base language and you're just fitting Gaelic on top of it. It's not a natural language. It becomes a hybrid language. It becomes a dialect in time. That's what happens in many countries, that dialects and creoles come about because one is the base language and there's been translation on top of it. So I have a real, absolute detestation of translation until the person is very fluent indeed. Really, they should be trained to international standards in terms of translation, not before that. So we'd been doing all the other things in terms of adults learning. We were using non-vocal or non-verbal communication in terms of the preschool that could be used with regard to adults learning. And then, of course, it just struck me. Why don't we actually use the things that are in the home for creating the course? For example, I've got a colleague at the Murray Language Centre, but he was also working with the preschool groups at the time. And he said, well, why don't you ask some of your field staff what they do from the time they get up in the morning till the time they go to bed? That will tell you all the things that they actually need. So we had 4 different situations. One family with a baby of 2 months old and a child 3 years, and another one 5 years. So they wrote out from Monday to Friday what they did every day, and on the Saturday and the Sunday. And that gave you all the different themes and topics that you required. And the second person had children at a different age, and the third person at a different age with teenagers as well. And the fourth person was a grandparent who looks after children, the grandchildren. And how different it was because the parent was leaving the child or the children with the grandparents for 5 days as she went out to work. Some were in school, some were under school age. And she told us, she simply wrote out all the different topics, so we were able to make a whole course out of that. Getting up in the morning, making the beds, breakfast, things to do with breakfast, the dinner, the lunch, the supper, putting on clothes. And then we asked and went back to them and said, what about the special days, like the holidays? What about the days that are really different from the normal week, like the holidays? We can make topics on these. And because most of the Gaelic speakers that are there are over the age of 45, most of them unable to read or write, the one thing we could do was to use them in enormous numbers or in large numbers. So to do that, we don't do any reading, no writing, no grammar, no translation. They're not going to be embarrassed. Like the person who came to me a few years ago from one of the universities. And he said, oh, I'd really like to go and work with an older person so that I can learn Gaelic. And I said, whatever you do, don't use grammar. I got a telephone the following day from this lady, And she said, I was so embarrassed. Oh, what was the first thing he asked me? He asked me about grammar. I said, well, why? Why on earth did you do that? Oh, I had to. How else am I going to learn? She would not go near anyone else again. She felt totally embarrassed. I was to blame. Even though I told him, I sat down with him for an hour, and I said, please don't do that. Don't do it. You're wrecking a whole community of people around her as well. It's not only one person. She will tell all her friends that you embarrassed her, and she won't take anyone else in. So the story has gone in the sense of how a curriculum, if you can call it, I hate the word curriculum, so it's the run of the day, of the week, that people can actually do. And those who are strongest in the language, far, far stronger than most of those that are under 40 or under 30, they lived it, they're living it from day to day. They know a wide variety of words, and vast variety of words, that most people who come out as teachers have no understanding of. The second part of it was, we also asked parents who had children, who had babies, what were the things that they did on a day-to-day basis? Well, the child gets up and screams and shouts or whatever in the morning, changes the nappy and all the other things during the day. So again, you had it straight in front of you. It was there for us, and natural. Now the next part of it was, how on earth can we get the language put into the home? What is it? Because if you take the person to a classroom, all it is a classroom. If you create the situation of doing the Gaelic in the home itself, it's no difficulty in transferring from one skill to the other, from one place to the other. The other part of it that had to be was that we had no reading, no writing, no grammar, no translation allowed on the course. No English allowed on the course either. So if you don't have these things, what do you use instead? Well, the one thing we don't use are pictures. We have to use the items. The items will tell you what the shape are. What does it they say, 50% or 70% or 80% of the language learning is done through feel and through touch and through sight? It became so easy. You didn't have to go to any shop other than if you were using games, which didn't have any writing on at all, which could be used. These things were very easy to do. And it was very easy for those who participated on the courses to take it into their own home as well. With regard to the Athram course, which is the baby's course, we use dolls, but normal clothes, changing, all the language connected with changing, the language of endearment, and the parents are there with the children at the same time. None of us can use any child. In that situation, we have to use dolls. Now, there's dolls up to £5,000 that cry, that laugh, that go to the toilet, or that you need a nap before, £5,000. We haven't bought any of these yet. They're usually about $35 or $40 that we use. Does the same job. Can't get them to cry, so £4,800 less, doesn't really matter. So it then came to the stage of doing the courses as well. So we did courses out in the community. We did them 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week. We couldn't get anyone to speak the language. How could we? How could we? We're awake for 112 hours each week. And 2 hours of that for a language. How could we? So anyway, about 3.5 years ago, I was in the fortunate position of being able to work on a full-time basis with another person, another partner. And we set up the organisation called the Murray Language Centre, or the centre with regard to adults learning. Really, it is adults. Over the age of 18, no one under the age of 18 is allowed to come to the centre. And what we did was we started using the techniques and the strategies that we developed in what's called TIP. TIP is Total Immersion Plus. It's total immersion plus using all the things on a day-to-day basis. It's a plus. So TIP, we were able to use it, and we did courses of 1 week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in our own home. And it worked really well. The strange thing that happened was after the first day, when we introduced the course on what was happening, we do a morning or an afternoon or both in English. The student needs to know what's ahead of them. So there's no chance that they're going to translate. There's no chance they're going to speak English at any time. And we insist that they don't either. We really go out of our way to insist. And they don't. After the first half hour, they don't. Everything is done entirely in Gaelic. The other part of it is that the course we're doing, it's not important. What's important about making a breakfast? What's really important about that? All the language that you would use in other circumstances are used there. But the person who's involved in the course has to participate. They don't sit down and read and writing, but they have to participate. The other part of it is we insist that they take a recording device so that they know what it's like at the very beginning, when they start, and at the end, when they leave. Usually they leave speaking after the second week. Sometimes the first week they finish up speaking as well. They go through all different stages. The first stage, they tell us that they're still translating in their head. And the second stage that happens is they begin trudging through mud. They go to bed at 6 in the evening, 7 in the evening, 8 in the evening. They're trudging. They are so tired. You wouldn't believe it. And why? Well, the subconscious is like a library. And the subconscious really wants to survive. It's the part of the brain that helps you to survive. And it wants everything done in English. Or it wants you to translate so that it doesn't have to do any hard work. It's been doing hard work when it was growing up as a child. It doesn't really want to do any hard work. But then suddenly it gives in. As long as there is no translation into English, the subconscious will give in. Normally after about 3 or 4 days. And then suddenly, it's as if the sunshine has come in the window. They go to bed in the evening so tired, and the following morning they wake up and they could dance. Really quite amazing, the transformation that occurs. Now, we allow our students to do up to 60,000 mistakes in a week. So if anyone makes any mistakes, it doesn't matter. They're going to hear it again. It makes absolutely no difference what mistakes they make. The important thing is that they are speaking. Just as a child will speak, when they're starting to speak, it all gets mixed up. And why shouldn't it? So the first stage that we're going through is their understanding and also coming to speaking. They're breaking through to speaking. And then the second thing that happens, as it widens out, you find that they start thinking in Gaelic as well. They'll tell you that they had a dream last night and they were speaking in Gaelic. The first time ever. It happens really quickly. But the emphasis on from 9 o'clock till 5 is that we're using Gaelic all the time. They're not going to run away from it. The subconscious has to accept it. So it's been most revealing, all the different stages, and there's many stages that they go through. We really need them to start thinking also, if they are a family, how they're going to transfer the language they're using and learning into their home situation as well. Because it needs to be practical. While adults have skills that children don't, a child of 3 has to learn how to tie his shoelaces. A man of 48 doesn't. Or if he does, then he really needs to have new training. He's in a bad way. So adults have skills far and above what a child has. Over and above. They don't have to learn the things that a child needs to learn. A child has 2 things if they're coming into a preschool group, and that's one of the best situations for them to learn a language. They have to learn about the play, and they have to learn the language as well. An adult doesn't have to do that. They know everything to do with the home. They know everything to do with most relationships. Now, there are certain things that we don't talk about. We don't talk about what we can't see or what we can't touch. It will come in, but we don't normally talk about it. It's not one of the topics that we have at the beginning until they break through. We don't talk about, really, other than we don't really talk about the individual. I know in terms of child learning techniques that the individual is the center of the world. That is not the same in terms of adults that we see. The other thing in terms of Gaelic is that numbers and counting numbers really quick is so important, so very, very important. It's as if you can count up to 100 in the first week. We usually do up to about 100 in the first week. It's 100 or 200 words that you're stringing together. So it helps in terms of the conversation. The other part of it is that your facial muscles, by the age of 12, your facial muscles go strong and solid. You have to be able to soften them. The best way of softening them is speaking. No other way around. Songs, I don't believe, help at all. In fact, we never use any songs. I can't sing anyway, but we never use songs until a person, or we would never use songs until a person has broken through to speaking. Songs are a form of poetry, certainly in Gaelic, and a much higher register. The only songs that we have done in preschool groups are learning songs, Gaelic language learning songs. Like you have head, toes, knees and toes. These are individual words that are not really songs at all. They're almost like ditties. So, in some ways I should move forward, but there's so much information in that thing, and we will be touching on tomorrow and on the following day. It became very clear to us that with people coming on courses, that they could learn really quickly, really incredibly quickly. So, because of that, and because of another thing that had happened a number of years previously, I was invited to go to Nova Scotia, where there is a Gaelic language community and the descendants of Gaelic language speakers of about 300,000. But there were 500 people left in 2005 who could actually speak Gaelic. There were lots of people, maybe another 2,000, who could understand it, but couldn't go any further, couldn't hold a conversation or anything. So I was invited across. In Scotland, the methods that we had at the time really weren't taken in at all. But we were able to go to Nova Scotia, and we did a 2-week-long course. There were 9 tutors there and 20 students, and all the students came to speaking within that 2 weeks. Some of them had a little Gaelic, some of them had been learning for 20 years. Some only just started. But because of the number of tutors that were there, and they were all speaking Gaelic, they couldn't speak any English within 600 yards of the house. So by the end of the 2 weeks, they were speaking. We had trained the initial 2 weeks of training with regard to tutors. We did 6 weeks training altogether with the tutors. What we're talking about may look easy, but it's not as easy as you think. There are certain things you do need to know. Since that period of time, of 500 speakers. It is, in 2014, it has gone up to 1,200. And by 2020, we hope it will go up to 2,000 or over 2,000 speakers that are speaking. People don't put down that they don't speak if they aren't speaking. So what I'm disappointed at in a way is that they haven't gone for long-term courses, so that you can take everyone that's coming onto the course to speak the language really quickly. Because learning debilitates people. They don't do things. If you're wanting a community to survive and to get on and to strengthen, the learning process is only like opening the door. It has nothing to do with what you can do afterwards. Not only that, if it takes too long, it debilitates other people who already speak. One of the very interesting things about Nova Scotia was that we asked all the students to find 5 people who spoke Gaelic. And they were mostly older people. So what you were doing was you were strengthening your community. You're getting those who already speak the language to pass it on and to pass on all kinds of traditions. And because it's a practical language, they were doing things connected with the culture, food connected with the culture, lots of things, music and other things as well. But we never really insisted that anyone go raw to any fluent Gaelic speaker that wasn't a teacher or that wasn't a tutor. First of all, they had to come to a certain level. And secondly, we had to spend time with them so that they didn't, if they were prone to it, talk about grammar or anything else of that nature, or translation, even though many of the older people had been used to a system where translation was the thing that they had to do. They didn't do anything else but sit in a chair and translate for them, or sing songs and then translate for them. So it became very important in terms of building the community, strengthening the community, getting the different age groups to go to the older people and the older people feeling as if they had a part to play as well. Really important. Now, many of them didn't get 5 people, but the aim was to have 5 people. Some only got 1, some got 2. But what it did was it strengthened. Now, in Nova Scotia, there's no Gaelic medium school, no Gaelic medium preschool, none at all. It's, I think, in 3 or 4 high schools as a subject, but there's many more children now coming through who speak the language as a first language, as a native language, because their parents have learned. And we're really pleased about that. Can I turn my attention to Scotland? We really became very concerned, and are very concerned today, that we've been concentrating on schools, where really the social language, the language of the home and of the community, we weren't really touching it. Really, we hadn't really touched it at all. And the propaganda about everything in Scotland is really about education. The government propaganda is about Gaelic education. Doesn't really see a whole holistic picture at all. So it started to strike us, are we starting far too late? We're wanting new, native Gaelic speakers again. What does that actually mean? It means one parent at least has to be fluent in the language in these categories for raising a child before the child is born. Afterwards, you're going after the dog's tail. You're running after yourself. You can't get into it. It's too late. So the last 3 years has also been concentrating on adults before the child is born. And to get them, and it is so difficult, it really is difficult, to try and get them to see that if you're wanting the next generation speaking the language, you have to go 5 years before the first child is born, or before the next child is born. And the 9 months, or as soon as the parent learns that she's expecting, throw everything connected with language learning out the window for the simple reason they're expecting a new child. So with noticing that people won't really participate in anything once a child is on its way, we had started talking about a parenthood course, and that's for expectant parents, all the different things and the language connected with it. Whether you, in terms of learning Gaelic in the home, or through Gaelic in the home, or through the Athram course, nothing to 3, you're learning to speak the language quickly. The really big and important thing for us is that people learn quickly. About 4 weeks ago, I met a man who comes from Edinburgh, and he's been learning Gaelic for 26 years. He can say a few sentences and a few words. He could write a book with regard to grammar. And we calculated between us that he spent £105,000 learning Gaelic. It's about $180,000. In 26 years. He's gone to courses, gone to weekend courses, evening classes, 2-week-long courses, month-week-long courses. He's got dictionaries, he's got all the computer games, not computer games, all the computer backup that they have, all the software that they have, the phrase of the day. It means nothing. It means nothing. Over £150,000 in learning one language that you can break through in the maximum of a month if you know the techniques. And I asked him, why was it that he never questioned it? Oh, he said, I got advice from the people I knew. And they just said, oh, continue. You know, you're really doing well. So it was, it just staggers me that you spent all that much money. Now, we have courses that cost money. Our courses cost money. And he's coming to us next year, and we have every expectation he'll break through to speaking in 10 days. I know that there will be a difficulty because he's so used to reading and writing. We have to throw them out into the office so that he doesn't get near them. And the first few days, I'm sure it'd be like pulling teeth. And there's another man I know who lives in Canada. He's been learning for 66 years. He can say a few sentences. He's in Scotland on courses every year. And he goes to any course he can in Canada. What he's spent over the years, he said it's quite natural, it is a hobby for him. It's nothing but a hobby. But there is also the situation in Scotland where you do have hobbyists. Really, you do have hobbyists who want to go for a social occasion to learn Gaelic. And that's all right, as long as they're not holding the other people back. It's much better to take 5 people to speaking fluently than to have 45 people learning an hour a week. Holding your community back. It holds them back. Our community, we have 60,000 people. It's on the endangered languages list. We have to do something about it quickly. And education, while it is a crucial factor, is only a crucial factor if all the other parts come together as well. We want to see parents talking to their children, not saying, oh, well, I can speak it, but I'm not speaking at home, the school can do it. That's nothing. That'll kill your language. And the language of the school often is not the language of the community. It changes, especially if they use translation. Causes hybrid languages. So that's why, in some ways, I'm really pleased with what's happened in Cape Breton and in Nova Scotia, because what they've done is concentrate fully on the adults, first of all. They really put their effort into the adults. They cannot at present get schools, but I am sure that within a number of years they will be able to. But the aim is to have native Gaelic-speaking children that are speaking Gaelic as soon as they speak. Now, they may speak other languages as well, at the same time. But it's so important that we get away from the hobbyist setup, where people are thinking that 1 hour or 2 hours a week will do. It never can. It never can. That's why we would really like to set up, and we're in the process of trying to set up 12 full-time centres throughout Scotland. They're not going to be cheap. In about 15, 20 years' time, I would really like to see about 54,000 students coming out of the 12 who have learned Gaelic. Now, in 1872, Gaelic was left out of the education system, even though there were Gaelic schools before then, mostly church schools. But after 1872, what happened was that the teacher would tie a piece of rope round the child's neck and attach a sheep's skull to it, or a goat's skull to it, or a piece of wood, machabuya, the yellow stick round the child's neck. They'd send them into the corner. The child in the evening would be belted, the last child who spoke Gaelic, and he'd be belted again the first thing in the morning, and could only get away from being belted a second day if he was able to pass it on to the next child who spoke. Within the year, none of the children spoke Gaelic, so that it was put away until the beginning of the next year. So we have reparations. Language loss was caused by government. Reparations are called for. There were 231,000 Gaelic speakers in Scotland in 1872. It's gone down to under 60,000. Didn't happen by chance. No chance at all. It happened through destruction of the language, of the culture, of the land, the whole lot. The Highland clearances, which left so many people over here, the area was emptied, completely emptied of people over a period of 100 years. Now, I don't want to leave on a sad note, and that is what it is. Really looking forward to the next 10 years. Really looking forward to it. Because we can take people to speaking so quickly. Now, taking people to speaking quickly on its own is not enough. They need to learn to read and write, and also, if they want to go to the higher echelons of translation. So, as I say, what we're wanting to do is to set up a full-time, 40-week, 35 or 40-hour week each week for a year, with regard to speaking the language and all the different components of it, and then a second year in terms of extending it with regard to reading and writing and many other parts of the culture as well. I hope it happens. We're here for it to happen. And if there is anyone here that would like more information on these things, or on the way we do language acquisition with regard to TIP, then I'd be very pleased to hear from you. The situation is not dire in our setup if you take away the difficult parts. Not at all. 15 minutes. Oh my goodness, I thought I had run out of time. Oh. So, what I would like to do is to finish off then really with saying thank you for allowing me to come. I hope I've given you some insight into what's happening within Scotland. Our situation's not easy. Far from it. We've been fortunate because about 30 years ago, I'd been talking to a member of government, and they said to us, we give money to Gaelic every year, but we don't see any result. But we'd really like to see some result, and then we can even give you more. And this was at the time of Margaret Thatcher. She said, if you can show that you're going to be successful, we will put money to the hilt to you. We will back you up every way, in all ways that we possibly can. So that's why we went out and set up preschool groups, because we thought that was a way to get Gaelic medium schools, and we thought that was a way that our language would be saved. that we really had struck it rich. Also, we have a television service, or part television service, radio service, and many other things, lots of books coming out and Gaelic medium schools. But we know it's not enough. Because the crucial point and part in learning a language to sustain it, to revitalize it, to create jobs, we're not doing. And that is getting people to speak Gaelic as quickly as humanly possible. Really, we should be looking at all the learners that are in Scotland and saying, if you haven't learned within a year, you're doing something wrong. You're just not doing it. You're simply not, you're not involving yourself as you should. You're either not interested in it, you're not doing enough, all you're doing is moaning, and the system of teaching or learning or acquisition is rotten. Look at it again. Look at it again. It's not working. Simply not working. So I would hope that in the next 10 years we can really change everything. Would you like any questions? Yes? I can't hear you.
Great, thank you. So in your course then, teaching language of the home and etc. So how long does it run? And it runs from 9 to 5 every day for how many days?
5 days.
5 days.
And the course itself, the basic course is 8 weeks.
Okay, so it's 5 days a week for 8 weeks.
Oh yes, that is really, it's
okay.
Just for one course. And each of the courses can take you to speaking. Every one of the courses can, each individual one, be it what's called the Altram course, can take you to speaking. The one we have a course with regard to parents who have children in the school. That course can take the adults to speaking.
And each of those subjects, each course would cover one subject, like in the home, like
yes.
Doing breakfast in like a day, right?
Well, there's 45 different topics in that course.
Oh, in each course?
Yeah, in that one course. In the Nothing to 3 course for the babies, there's 60 topics in it.
Okay. So so there's a course for like in the home, and then there's a separate course for talking to infants and young children. And within each of those courses, you have 45 to 60 topics that you cover.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes. There's 12 courses altogether, and we've also developed about 100 manuals and handbooks to go with them as well. Which
the students work with outside the course? Or?
Absolutely not, no.
No.
The work outside is going to people who speak the language outside.
Oh, right, so the handbooks are for the instructors.
For the instructors, but there is a person that can speak Gaelic. If you're working in the breakfast, you don't have any book beside you.
Right.
Because each of the themes that are in it is dissected.
Right.
And the items will take the language out for you.
So workbooks and stuff for the student are totally distracting.
Oh, completely.
So you just do it all listening.
Oh, no, they are involved. And it has to be great fun.
I mean, physically doing what you're doing, but like they're
setting
totally
the table,
physically involved, yeah.
Preparing the food. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Make cakes and lots of things like that, they are involved in them. That's how the language comes together.
Wonderful, okay.
It can be basket making, it can be making us, I'm trying to think, it can be keep fit, it could be anything. The important thing is you're working and physically involved, because your mind is distracted. If you're sitting down writing, your thoughts and your eyes are not on what's actually happening. You have to be involved. That's why we normally have a maximum of 15 on any one course. Right. Now, we can also have more than one tutor. It usually speeds it up even further, because there's conversation going between the tutors, which helps.
Great.
Sorry.
Anybody else? Here. Oh. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. One of them is for my neighbor. The first one addresses cost, who students funding in that, and do you find that students paying helps motivate them to participate and study?
At present, the courses we're doing, all the students pay.
And that funds the whole course? Or is there external, it helps fund it?
We would like many more, but what the aim is to have a full-time centre and get government money to actually run it, because it is going to be expensive. And why shouldn't the government be paying? We pay either taxes. I'm told the Gaelic cultural products in Scotland, the products that have come from the Gaelic language in one form or another, like whisky, is about 15 billion a year. When you look at all the different products that have come from our language and count it all up, it's about 15 billion. It's time we started getting some of that back. It's all going to something else. It hasn't come to us ever. And they usually tell us our culture doesn't make money. What does whisky do? What does tartan? They sell about 300 million pounds of tartan a year. We have allowed these things to go and become part of the English language economy. Gaelic language cultural products makes enormous amounts of money for both Britain and Scotland. So we're looking to set up full-time centres. In the meantime, people pay to come onto our courses.
Thank you. So the second part is, I don't want to offend anybody, but should we stop teaching our languages as core language programs? Because from my perspective, it gives the government a chance to say, well, look, we're spending all this money on a program, which is never going to produce a speaker, like from a perspective of another speaker. Like, would it be better to redirect our energies into programs that are actually going to accomplish something?
Can I suggest one thing? What I'm talking about is in Scotland.
Oh, well then, yes.
Well, I can answer what you're saying, but really you must remember that I'm from Scotland.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and that's what I meant.
Right. So
I'm not looking for advice from your perspective.
I don't believe that you can stop immediately. I think that it takes a period of time. It takes a great deal of knowledge and information being passed to individuals. It would be nice if it could happen within 2 years or 3 years, but please don't stop what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, and that's not what I meant. I studied French as a core language program for 10 years, and I can read signs if I go to Quebec and not get lost, but that's about it. It was completely useless for me. If anything, it inoculated me against French, wanting to actually study and to be able to speak the language.
The thing is, there are teachers that are involved in what you're doing tonight. You cannot alter these things just now. They all have a stream and a cycle of change. When that cycle of change, if it does come to an end, like for example, within the Gaelic medium schools in Scotland, 2 was set up in the first year. The other program still kept going because they needed the teachers, but only in these places. The projects that were going on, please, I don't want anyone to leave this place and blame me for suggesting they should change immediately. We don't work.
Oh, no, you can blame me for that.
we don't work in terms of schools. Schools are a different matter altogether. We are talking and trying to make it clear that it's those that are over 18 years of age, parents and adults, really are the people who steer language, not children. Children who learn a language can contribute to what the adults do. It's the adults that actually make everything happen in every kind of way. That's why you have children going through Gaelic medium schools who have no Gaelic in the home. They can't pass it on to their children. It's adults that can do that. Even when these children grow up, they don't have the language. They don't have the area of language. They don't have parentese. They don't have the language of the home. And if you're wanting a community which uses Gaelic, you have to have it in the home. Because it's out of the home that the language comes, not out of the school. The school can either help a little or it can hinder. But please, the schools we have, they help. So no, I wouldn't want anyone to leave here and say that I had anything to do with any major change. You have to organise your own situations. We can work with adults, whatever the situation is, wherever, training them how to do things and learn the language. But in terms of schools, I don't want anyone to point any finger at me.
Thank you.
Right.
I have several questions too. Because you have your own courses in your own schools geared towards adults, and you're saying that there are several things, but first thing, assessments. Right now, those of us who, can you hear? Oh, so those of us who are doing schools, teaching in schools for credit or things, we are pressed by state to come up with assessments. Mm-hmm. Do you have to go through the same process? I mean, like, our language is our own language, right? It belongs to us in our communities, and we should come up with our own assessments. But to come up with some kind of a toolkit, how did you go about creating assessments to gauge your students' learning? Well, that's the first one.
We don't really do assessments at all at this stage. Obviously, we will have to do them if we develop full-time centres. But the aim for us is really to get people to speaking. Many of the people come to us will not go near an examination. Those who want examinations don't come near us usually. Really, at this stage, in maybe 5 years' time, when there are full-time centres established, that's a different thing altogether. But the assessments in terms of some languages in Scotland are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Can you go to the shop? They have about 5 or 10 sentences, and that's the assessment that they've passed level 1. Sorry.
Okay, no, great, because I feel the same way. We don't need to assess our students. We see through observation, through their speaking, and, you know, that's how we should assess. But we're pressured lately to come up with assessments because our students are getting credits for their learning. But also, I really like what you said about the government's created the laws for our language, and we lost our language and the reparation. And I kind of thought back on Sylvia's speech of I don't know more. That can go across to the language and get our reparation for being I don't know more, and get that government to really pay for our languages instead of limiting us to this $30,000 a year we get for language programs. I mean, I think I don't know more, or a group like that, us here, could really do something and get, you know, get that reparation for our language. I don't know, I have a lot of notes here, but those were the main things. And also, you answered one of my questions that you are working towards getting several more centers.
Oh yes, 12.
That are specific to adults.
Oh yes.
And right now, our focus, I think we're kind of behind you, probably years behind you, because our focus is on early childhood now. Most of our program anyway is focused on early childhood. If we can get that child to speak the first language, you know, from birth. And the parents are fluent speakers, but for some reason we're growing up now thinking, wow, our babies do not understand our language. They're born to learn only to learn the English language, and that's a backward thinking, but that's how it is in my community anyway, which I can speak about. The parents that I spoke with and the children, even the grandparents, the child is growing up and automatically first language is English. Well, it's too hard for the child. No, it's not hard, but it's the first language. So we're focusing on early childhood, and I don't know if we're backwards or...
No, we started in that way, but just saw that with less and less children coming in who spoke any Gaelic, we had to move to try and get people before they had any children. But the best person to talk to with regard to assessment in Gaelic in Scotland is sitting beside you. He's going to be the next speaker.
I told him we're speaking later already, so that's good.
And one final thing on that point. You have to go out to the parents. You have to go out to people to alter their opinions. We had to. It was impossible not to. You literally have to bang on doors, hold meetings, and say, why aren't you raising your children? And the final thing, the reason why teaching of languages have occurred the way they are today is because of our university system of 300 years ago. When Latin was in the system, you didn't have to learn to speak it. All you had to do was to learn to read it, to write it, know the grammar, and do translation. The universities were perfect with that. thank you, and may I thank every one of you, especially Ine, for the invitation to the Murray Language Centre in Scotland, and really I'm so grateful for being able to come here. Thank you, and also the Indigenous Languages Institute as well. Thank you. Bye.